Hi, welcome to Culture Shock. So this week in South Africa, we came out of lockdown for the first time in 35 days. So we've eased some of those restrictions, not eased them a lot. We're still confined to our homes largely, but some of the shops are now open, and that means we're getting a sense of what the world's going to look like post COVID-19. Past the major scare anyway. Supermarkets are open, but now people are still keeping their distance and they're wearing masks when they're in there. So there's a sort of a post-apocalyptic hellscape type thing going on, even in a trip to Pick and Pay. It's all very interesting. The big thing, of course, is going to be to see what happens with businesses now that some of them are starting to reopen. They're starting to get back to trying to kickstart their operations, but with the necessity for social distancing and all of that kind of thing still in place. So there's a lot of differences, a lot of things that we just don't know yet. And what's been interesting, I guess, is the way the conversation has evolved over the last few days, in particular down here. There's been a whole bunch of hyperbolic nonsense fueling conversation over the past 5 weeks about what things are going to look like with so much certainty. It's going to be back to normal. It's going to be completely as things were, and this has all just been a mistake. Or there are lots of people saying, no, it's all changed forever. I tend to temper my judgment with these things. First of all, I have to confess that I don't actually know any more than anybody else does about what it's going to look like. But I tend not to see too many extremes. It's probably going to be something down the middle, and that's been the subject of some of these videos over the past couple of weeks. What's been super interesting, though, is to listen to organizations that I rate enormously, ones that have got a real sort of understanding of the importance embedded in their DNA, by the way, the importance of employee engagement, the importance of employee experience, the importance of culture, and all the investment they've made in those sorts of things, and how they're kind of going, yeah, but we're not sure how this will all pan out now that things have changed. And there's sort of an authenticity to that sort of conversation, which again has supplanted some of the hyperbolic nonsense. Now people, instead of saying we know exactly what things are going to be, they're saying, well, we're starting to sort of see that there are a lot of unknowns here. One example, there was a webinar carried out during the week by an insurance company, one that I rate very highly. It was an open webinar, but I haven't been given permission this afternoon to mention them specifically in Culture Chart, so I'm not going to do so. But they were saying that their head office building has around about 1,000 people working out of it, and they can't see a time during 2020 when any more than about 300 people will come back to work there on a daily basis, which means they've accepted that possibly as many as 700, as many as 70% of their workforce are going to be remote workers all the way through to 2021. That's a massive change. They're not saying it is going to be that way, however. They're just saying they don't know what it will actually look like, and this is the way it's going to be now, and that's what they're kind of working. That's the supposition they're working on. What it means is that there's a certain vulnerability about leadership now, which I don't think we're necessarily very good at displaying. We tend to think as leaders of organizations that we need to have all of the answers. And I think in this instance, it's probably clear that we don't. And it's quite important, by the way, that we say that we don't. We've been talking about remote sandcastles at Happy Sandpit for the last few weeks since a research tool was developed in the very beginning of this lockdown phase. And what we've been learning from interactions around that, very simply, is that the one thing that seems to be the absolute North Star for leaders and organizations that are getting this stuff right now is the ability to admit that we don't know what we don't know. The ability to actually sit up and say, there are unknowns here and we're just trying to navigate them. Rather than coming up with this sort of strength in certainty and putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is the way things are going to be, when we all know you can't know. We all know you can't be certain about this. We all know you're making predictions about things that are out of your hands. Leaders that are knocking it out of the park are saying, look, our best guess is this, and this is what we think we should do. But taking information, taking ideas, taking thoughts, taking intelligence from the organization. We've long believed at Happy Sandpit that organizations that do the best job of developing strategy, developing ideas, developing employee experience, developing tools and ideas around employee engagement are those that treat their own organizations as universities from which they must learn. It's all well and good going to the great universities, the great business schools and learning from them. It's all well and good getting that kind of theoretical information. And I'm sure there's massive value in it as well, by the way. But your organization's unique. Your organization is strange. Your organization is quirky. If you've done any work on building culture, you've done a great deal of work in building something fairly individual. And if that's the case, That's where you need to get the ideas from. And that's what the remote sandcastle research tool has been all about. And that's what we've started to learn, is that organizations that are able to sit back and say, where the leaders are able to sit back right now and say, guys, or maybe lean forward rather, and say, guys, listen, we don't know what the future is going to look like. We can't create any absolute guarantees. This is the direction we're going to go. What do you think? Do you think we've got this right? And if this is the case, will you come with us? And there's a vulnerability about that. There's a humanness about that, which is absolutely appropriate for our times. And I think that's something that I definitely got out of this insurance webinar during the week, was this notion that we're going to have to take a guess at this, and we're going to have to start making some contingency plans around what we think our guess is going to be, because we've got to put a stake in the ground. And we're possibly wrong, but we just don't know. And so we're going to try and lead you out of this with our best guesses. It's a vulnerable place to be. It's not the coolest place in the world to be, but it's probably a more authentic place to be. It's a better place to be than constantly trying to lead people with absolute certainty into the unknown. So anyway, that's been food for thought for me all week. I hope it's food for thought for you as well. And I wish you a very successful week.